Well, it's like, I don't want what you think should be. I want somebody who's tried a bunch of different things to varying degrees of success and has made important decisions, critical decisions, and then reflects on those decisions and can explain why they made those decisions and why they've jumped from thing to thing to thing.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's something that you don't see. And again, the military, we breed it in. We have all these processes, and we have, a strict, from everything, the way that you file a travel voucher is very strict and very regimented. And the way that you promote in rank is very strict and very regimented. And those emergency breaks and those processes do not exist in the civilian world. They just don't. People they'll look at that and be like, great. So what? So what are you going to do for me today? How much money did you save? Did you make us more efficient? Are you able to bring value? Can you communicate these things that you have in such a way that everyone else understands it? You can go into a room all you want and you can say all these things. If nobody understands or values those things, it doesn't matter. You're just another dude.
Is that much of it? That's not much of a change for you, right?
My name is Carey Kight. I used to load bombs in the Air Force, and now I'm a writer, a filmmaker, and an entrepreneur. Through using the post 9/11 GI Bill to go to college, working hourly jobs to pay the bills, and freelancing my way into a career, I've studied what it takes to successfully transition from service to civilian, and that study has become a conversation. On this podcast, I speak to other veterans, successful artists, and entrepreneurs about their transition, what they did well, where they failed, what they learned, and most importantly, how they applied their skills. 2025 is off to a great start. Episode 127 features my dear friend Aaron Love, a retired Air Force Pararescueman and the co-host of One's Ready and the War Room podcast. Welcome. This is Veteran Made. This episode is brought to you by Go Pills, a nootropic that gives your brain neurotransmitter support both acutely and over time. Those of us that served in the military, regardless of where we served and in what capacity we served, all came into contact with different chemicals, different percussions, and various elements of our environments that have affected our brain's ability to function. Think about your brain's performance and your mental health right now, yes, but think about your future too. We have so much more control over our long-term health than we realize. Visit gopills.com and use code VM15 at checkout for 15% off. That's VM15 for 15% off. Give your brain the neurotransmitter support it needs to perform well right now and over time.
All right, we will jump into this here. Good evening from the great state of Ohio. Good afternoon from the great state of Nevada. Aaron Love, welcome back to Veteran Made.
Carey, what's up, brother? Thanks for having me, man. Love this place. I love it here, man. I'll come back anytime I'm allowed.
You're always allowed. I love it. Yeah, we were going to end 24 with you, but we're starting 25 with you. In 23, you were the most listened to episode of that year, the first full year of the podcast. So the audience, my audience, your audience knows who you are. So we don't have to do the whole intro, but give us a little bit of a brief primer on where you've been since we spoke last. Not since we spoke last in person at your house a couple of weeks ago, which was amazing.
Yeah.
But on the podcast.
Yeah, man. So it's me, former PJ. I walked away from the Air Force in January of 2024. So it's been, a year, coming up on a year anniversary of me getting out. Currently secured another position. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Advanced Entertainment Services here in Vegas, and we're the premier special effects company here in Vegas. So if it goes boom inside a room, if you go see a Cirque show, if you go see the Dallas Mavericks play, if you see the Golden State Warriors play, and you see sparks and fog and lasers and a whole bunch of other stuff, man, that's us. It's been a crazy ride. So I've been with them for about 3 or 4 months now, and it's been great. But my other side projects, as everybody knows, the One's Ready podcast is still going strong. Peaches is going to retire here really, really soon. So actually, this week, he retires and steps away. So that means all 3 of us old crotchety Air Force operators were retired, and we're weapons free, so to speak, to say whatever it is we want now. So mom and dad can't call us and tut us over something that we said or we misspoke. So that freedom feels good. But we've been chugging right along. It feels good. We love what we're doing. We love engaging with this next generation of warriors and special operations hopefuls, regardless of the branch. We talk to all of them and help get to the right place. We have a big network of folks now that we're happy to be engaged with. If you go over to Jay from Green Beret Chronicles, or if you go over to Nate Cronaccia's page, so Valhalla VFT, a bunch of these folks, Jake Zwig, Ben Pappas, all of those folks are doing great things in their own space. And that kind of led me into the War Room podcast, where Jake, Jay, myself, and Ben. So it's all 4 services represented. We got 2 officers and 2 enlisted dudes. And we just, think about a valuetainment sort of PBD podcast where you have a panel of folks with differing opinions, and we don't always agree, and we're not always right or correct, but we do explore a whole bunch of stuff, and we really value the whole purpose of that initiative. There is, man, the GWAT veterans are dinosaurs at this point. For a guy like me that grew up in the early hot and heavy days of GWAT, where especially here in Vegas, the first time, 4 deployments in 4 years, or three deployments in 4 years. I barely missed the 4th one before I went to Kirtland to be an instructor. But man, you're talking about, going for 6 months, you're home barely long enough to train and go back to the other one. Like that experience and that knowledge is going to fade away. The people that know what it sounds to have a bullet whiz by their head, or that know what it's like to attend a funeral and pound their flash into a casket, as morose and as sad as those things sound, like, unless we teach people about that experience, they're just not going to have it. And, we value the country, and we value the things that we do so much that we want to make sure that stuff lives on. So that's what the War Room podcast is all about. You can find me over there, either at One's Ready or at the War Room or at Aaron Loves America, where I definitely get way more spicy again, since I'm retired. Nobody's allowed to call me and tell me anything. So it's just, I'm an American citizen, an uncompromising conservative. And I love having that page too, for all the craziness that goes on, either in the, is this a conspiracy? Is this a psyop? Or really just shining a light onto some stuff that we need to change. You know what I mean? We're running up on the inauguration now. President Trump obviously got elected 45th and 47th, and he's shaking things up with a bunch of disruptors. And I'm happy to be involved in the Veterans for America First initiative. I'm a board member over there as well. I'm heavily involved in that space, and also at Veteran Bushido Brotherhood, which we find every single veteran that wants to find a tribe. We do that through jujitsu. Jujitsu is the main push there, but basically the Veteran Bushido Brotherhood is just about finding these vets that lost their team, lost their way, lost their sense of purpose and mission. And through group fitness of any of their choosing, we sponsor those athletes to go try it out. I don't care if you want to do Pilates or Zumba or jazzercise, but we'll pay for your first 3 months. And, that's been going really well. I've been on the board at Veteran Bushido for a little bit over a year. But Jarek Fry runs a great shop. It's awesome. And I'm just finding ways to be of value at this point.
I got to get back in touch with him. He and I were messaging a little bit, I think about a year ago. I gotta get him on to talk about that.
Jarek is awesome. Jarek is a great dude. Marine, couple deployments. He's got a crazy backstory. I'll tell you what, one of the most impressive serial entrepreneurs that I've ever seen. I get wacky texts from him. He's like, "Hey, what do you think about this, man?" I'm like, "Jarek, how did that even enter your brain, brother? Like just how?"
I love it. That's what we're all about here. As you were just talking about shaking things up here, and this episode will go live on Tuesday. So it's this week, so 2 weeks before the inauguration, 2.5 weeks before the inauguration, which will be on the same day that our Buckeyes are probably going to be playing the national championship.
Let's go.
That's going to be a fun day.
Let's go.
Do you follow Cynical Publius on X? Do you know who that is?
I don't.
It's like one of those Anon veteran guys who's interesting. He wrote a long, it wasn't a thread. It was just like, now that you can write pretty much unlimited characters on.
Yeah, exactly.
He was talking about today, this generation of veteran is different than any other generation of veteran in this country's history because of the nature of deployments that we've experienced. World War II guys, they went a couple years. Some guys did 4 years of combat, but really for the most part, it was like 1 to 2.
Right.
Vietnam was longer, but still not 20 plus years. The way that you guys in particular, and even some of us support troops, did. I mean, even mine, right? I did 6 on, 6 off, 6 on, 6 off, and then tried to do that third and wasn't able to. But
right.
This generation of warfighter, this generation of veteran is different than any other because of the either sustained combat or sustained deployments that we've experienced. And depending on what the nature of the next conflict is, this generation, you guys that are retiring now, and if I'd have stayed in, I'd be retiring right about now as well. It's not going to be like this, for the next decade.
No, and it might not be like that in the future. We fought a 3-front war. Like we were in 3, Iraq, Afghanistan, and then basically if you lump everything else into, everywhere else into everything else, you didn't know between 4 or 5 different locations where you were going. Like, as you plan for that deployment, like, that's a crazy thing to try to get people to wrap their head around. I enlisted, I went down to the recruiter's office on September 12th or September 13th, 2001. And I knew for a fact I was going to get into a fight. I knew for a fact that I was going to go do something. We went to Iraq, shortly after that, Afghanistan shortly after that. And we started expanding combat operations, kinetic and otherwise, places like Africa and Yemen and some of these other far flung places of the world. I don't know if the next fight is going to involve that much, that many locations or that sustained level of operations. It really was just crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll do the Trump weave here because there's a handful of things that I want to talk to you about, and they're all related to each other. Namely, coming up on a year of retirement, I want to hear about your transition, your experience with the organization that helped you, your experience getting into the civilian role that you're in now. But kind of starting with you mentioned, on Aaron Loves America, where you get more spicy. You were spicy before, even when you were still in. Right now, you just get more spicy. But I'm curious, at large, like what does being retired for a year, how does that affect your content creation? How does that affect the way that you look at the topics that you want to talk about? Right, at One's Ready, it's very tactical, it's very practical. Mm-hmm. It's like, here's what, here's how, here's why, and it's a journey that you're helping these guys through, right? And then the War Room, it's more of, like you said, this panel style where you guys are talking about different things and having disagreements in good faith, learning from each other, making mistakes, having great conversation, right? That's the way that new media is moving. So how does being retired color your view? And does it color it in a way that you expected or didn't expect?
Well, definitely didn't expect, right? So, as you're getting out and you're starting to make that early transition part, and I got some great input from Ben Pappas that's over on the War Room, and that guy is just a 100-pound brain and a very good-looking MARSOC body. But Ben really told me, he's like, listen, man, it takes like 5 years to transition. It takes, fully 5 years to get used to it. I think I've told you this story before, but the very first time that, my wife and I, we were going to take the young man and we were going to go and take a trip. And I, no kidding, had like a half an hour period where my mind was blown. I was like, wait, who do I have to tell where I'm going? Who do I have to give an address or a phone number to? Like, my new employer doesn't care what I do on the weekends. They're like, hey, we have this work that we got to get done. But, if you leave the greater Las Vegas area and you go outside of that area, I don't need to tell anybody. I don't need to do anything. But that realization is kind of sweeping. You always have this thing running in the background of, I'm in the military, I have these other rules and regulations that are much more strict than a normal American citizen, and for good reason. But you always have those things kind of like running in the background, right? So there is a sense of freedom, but there's also, a sense of risk, because with all freedom comes risk. And, as I'm making content or I'm trying to figure out how to use my experience in a good way, the last thing that I ever want to do is like, oh, as a PJ, as a special operator, as a former military guy, sometimes that experience is necessary to tell people so that they can understand where you're coming from. But I never want to do that in a way that gives me credit that I don't deserve. I never want to do that in a way where I'm saying that as if I'm building up this big wall of infallibility. And we've seen it, in the recent stuff with Tim Kennedy and now Sean Ryan and Terminal CWO and all this stuff blowing up about the Vegas thing. People want to get out there and they want to be right. But when you start getting into this area where you're using it as a shield, I don't want to do that at all. I want to use that as a way to bring people in and say, hey, I may have had these experiences, but I want to create content that people that have no clue about being in the military. I want to create content and frame it in a way where I'm like, hey, I see this from a different optic. I hope that you can see it the same way that I see it. And then we can talk about where you think I'm wrong or you think I'm right, or there's somewhere in between where we can have a discussion and we can have discourse. There is a lot of, now as I'm, a year through it and as a year through being, just a normal American citizen. And I say that with pride because I love being an American. It's the greatest thing on the face of the planet. But even saying that, there's a price that you have to pay for the freedoms that we have. And I don't think that my career, my 22-year career in the Air Force, I don't think that gets me anything. And I would really hate to put that out in such a way where people feel like it's a barrier, as opposed to, hey, I had these specific experiences. Let's use that as an opening to talk about valuable stuff. Like, let's find where we are the same, and that really started from One's Ready is something that we tell people all the time is like, man, we are open, we're honest, we're transparent, we have long form conversations. We talk about failures more than we talk about successes. None of us aggrandize ourselves, and that's by design, because I want people out there to look at me and go, oh, he is a normal, fallible dude that makes mistakes, but he was able to do this thing, and it was nearly impossible. He shouldn't have been able to do that. I hope that they can see that in themselves. I hope that through our conversations, they can look at us and go, on the War Room or Aaron Loves America or any of this stuff. Hey, wait a second. This guy's just a normal citizen, but he's out here trying to get what truth we can out there. He's out there trying to have these conversations that support the values and the morals and the things that America was built on. I want them to see themselves in me and give them a pathway, right? We lean into mentorship. A great quote that I heard was, leadership and mentorship are a little bit different. Leadership is walking to a door and opening it. Mentorship is hoping to get somebody to walk through that door, even though you don't walk through it. I want them to go further than I did. I want them to be better, faster, stronger, bigger, smarter, all of those things. I want to pour my experience while I still have it, while it's still relevant. I want to get that in the hands of the people that need it. And that's this younger generation, and it's even your fellow citizens.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because like as social media and X in particular, now that Elon has made it the free speech platform of the world, right? Not just this country, but of the world. You see all the stuff that's going on in Britain, has been going on in Britain, and the way that they're talking about it on X right now. And then you look at what, I don't really care too much about Tim, but you look at what Sean is doing, and inside the community, right? If you're an operator, a former operator inside the community, some people will respect that. Some people will like that. Some people will assume that there's credibility there, but others might not. Right. Mm-hmm. But outside of the community, people hear that and they're like, oh, this person must be credible because they had a Maroon Beret or a Green Beret, or a SEAL Trident. Right. And so like, as you navigate these waters and you think about, you're a free speech guy, you're a conservative, like it's important to get these things out there and get these conversations out there. That does mean that there are going to be mistakes that are going to be made, right? There's going to be, wrong information that gets out because as things move fast, my wife and I were having this conversation the other day. I was like, man, this shit in Vegas with that Cybertruck, like this, and this, I have no idea if any of this is true, but it's just happening on the feed. Oh, so quickly, and then you watch what's been going on with Sean over the course of the last few days. And it's like, I'm glad that information is out there and those conversations are being had, but I don't know where, I know where the responsibility lies, right? It lies, here and here, right? For myself, but like for other people, it's this Wild Wild West again.
It really is. And it's competing ideas. And I am not of the normal, like I'll lean into everything. Like you want to tell me about the deepest, darkest PSYOP conspiracy thing, man, I'll entertain it. But you have to get to a point where it's like, man, there's value in being wrong. There's value in having those things. Sean's going to go live, I think like 3 or 4 hours here on X and Twitter Spaces and address a bunch of stuff. And, this is just my personal opinion talking. Like, I think we outran our headlights on this one. I think, Sean putting that episode out, like, we'll see what he says or what we find to be true, or there's going to be answers that we never get. I think there's value in that, though, even in being wrong. And that's the shift that we're seeing from the legacy media and whatever. And the rest of the world writ large hasn't caught up to that yet. People are talking about, oh, Sean should shut his show down and do all this other stuff. Be like, hold on, bro. Do you know how many times over the past, I don't know, since the invention of journalism, do you know how many times people have been wrong and you just weren't aware of it because you don't have the access to the thing that we're having? As we look at the new media and in the podcast space, where people are, independent journalists or independent analysts or whatever label you want to put on them, there's going to be these things. There's going to be hits and misses. There's going to be, stuff that happens. But I think that's valuable. I think that shows that these institutions, they're not infallible. They aren't. There is no 100% truth. There is always 3 sides to every story. There's your story, their story, and the truth. And it's always a mix of those things. And of course, you want to try to be as true and as honest and transparent as always, but it's a space. Again, it comes with a lot of risk, Yeah.
I'm the same way, right? Like I say, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I'm listening. Keep talking. I'm interested,
Right.
I'm curious, I'm open-minded.
Listen, man, they are fun. I'll entertain that stuff all day. Like, you want to tell me that the moon isn't real? Let's go. It's what now? It's a satellite from the Anunnaki that is meant to harvest human emotions to power an alien that we don't even, can't possibly understand. Okay, great. I'll entertain it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like I'd rather make those aggressive mistakes, right? I'd rather those mistakes being made aggressively and quickly, and trusting the people to have discourse with each other, right? Like, even getting off of conspiracy theories, or I guess even leaning into it, like if you talk about a conspiracy theory and there's all the branches off of that tree, you're going to cull those branches as you go, right? As you have that conversation, as you listen to these new ideas, and then as you put forth an idea, so, well, that part doesn't really make sense. So we'll dispense with that one. Okay, but these ones, all right, well, and then you get closer and closer and closer. It just happens at a faster clip now, where the legacy media was able to make those mistakes slower, and were able to make those mistakes more quietly because they had all of the control.
And you can message it and you can massage it and whatever else. And I think as this new, the new media that we're talking about here, remember, it's not that old. We're talking, 2 years. This is the first time that it's had the impact on a presidential election the way that it is. It's the first time that information sharing, especially if you look at, the past 4 years. I don't know if you remember, but there was this whole lockdown thing with this thing called COVID. But, during that time, it was really when it started to really rear its head and go, wait, we are all interconnected in such a way that we can have these conversations. And you saw things like censorship and all this other stuff as everybody was trying to hold on to that information flow. It's just wild. Like, the Wild West is a great way to put it, but we are going to have to go through these early stages of figuring it out. Everybody's going to learn from, the Vegas Tesla bombing incident, because they're going to like, okay, well, maybe we should wait on this, and maybe everything isn't a conspiracy theory, and maybe just because something is listed on some wacky site, maybe it isn't true. And I think as you see the space evolve, you're going to see people learn from this. Like, think about the next generation of folks that are going to do this and how they leverage that space in a way that is beneficial and that is, in every sense of the word, necessary.
Yeah, it's a matter of trust, right? Like, do you trust the people to have information, make decisions for themselves, make decisions within their family unit, then make decisions within their community unit? Do you trust people to talk to each other, or do you not, right? Like, growing up in the 90s, there's the 24-hour news cycle. And, Ed Rush, you guys had Ed Rush on. I can't remember if it was on your episode or another episode I listened to, but, the 24-hour news cycle is what, I mean, CNN essentially is what, I don't know if it was the B2 or the B1, but the American public did not know about that airframe, but then Desert Storm happens and CNN has it on fucking TV, and nobody knew what to do with it. Right. And growing up in the 90s, your 24-hour news cycle, we're constantly bombarded with information, good information, bad information, too much information. And now fast forward to 2025, we're raising our kids and they're like, 24-hour news cycle. Dog, I'm waking up at 2 a.m. to check and see what Elon said.
Right. Yeah. It's like, I don't even know the appropriate time to say, but it's just it's an ever evolving, ever present news cycle where it is, things are always happening everywhere all the time. And because, again, of our connectedness, I don't even know if humans are supposed to be able to, see atrocities in Ukraine as they happen in real time, thanks to GoPro footage that was uploaded 45 minutes ago. Like, again, all freedom comes with immense risk, but I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, do we trust the people or not? Good, bad, or indifferent, right?
Yeah. We'll get back into some of this stuff. I want to jump back to your retirement. When did you start preparing for retirement? You're a senior enlisted guy. I got out at 4 years. I didn't prepare at all. You had 22 years. When did you start preparing? What did that process look like for you?
That's a good question. So I knew I was done in 2019. I'll tell you what, that was when I knew I had 2 back-to-back huge losses that were immensely impactful to my mental health. Never recovered from them, still working through it to this day. But I knew I had a distinct feeling. It was I was actually on a parachute jump. I was actually underneath a canopy and I was drifting down to the ground, falling with style, as it were, because you don't fly. And I was literally thinking about everything else other than that. You would think in that scenario, like, I don't have a million jumps as a guy. I'm an average jump number guy. I was never, jumping was never a thing. That it was fun and it was exciting. It was exhilarating. But I always, for whatever reason, my brain never got to the place where I was like excited about it. When I became a jump master, it was like I was terrified that I would miss something or one of my guys would get hurt. And it was never one of these things where it was good. But I started having, late 2019, my good friend Peter died in a training accident. Less than a month later, I was, right next to Cole Condiff, Staff Sergeant Cole Condiff, when he exited an airplane due to a premature firing of his reserve, and he was lost in the Gulf of Mexico. We worked that recovery for a long time, and it's a intensely emotional story. But shortly after that, like, I just knew that I couldn't do the job anymore. And it was this feeling where I was like, okay, I'm going to start looking for an exit here, and obviously, engage with mental health and try to figure out exactly how it is that I could. So for the transition piece, for actually, like, no kidding transition, that was 2023. Early in 2023, I was like, okay, hey, the exit is coming up soon here, and I'm going to start really preparing myself to step on into this next life, whatever that looks like. Which is when, thankfully, I found the Special Operations Transition Foundation, or SOTF, which is it's a nonprofit organization. It's, basically a huge network of special operations idiots like me. And I say that lovingly. I do not say that with any malice in my heart, but, like, I never got out of the team level. My highest positions were always inside the squadron. I didn't work at the group. I didn't work at the wing. I didn't have any of these other, important things that you're supposed to do as a senior NCO. I just didn't value them. There's a large amount of imposter syndrome too. I don't know how good I would be in that room, to be quite honest with you. Like, I always valued taking teams downrange, deploying, and bringing back, hopefully, more people than we left with, and never less. I wanted to go save lives and aid the injured. That's what I wanted to do. And that kept me at the squadron. As a matter of fact, when I left Kirtland, I had a bunch of people like, hey, you're the op soup of Kirtland. That's a pretty big deal. There was a troop chief position, so a flight chief position, and that's technically a demotion to go to the 2-2. I was happy to do so. I was like, oh man, put me back on the team, give me a deployment cycle, give me a thing to train to, let me go crush it. That's where I felt the best. Well, that doesn't necessarily look the best on a resume, especially with a guy with no 4-year degree. I don't value brick and mortar colleges or the education that they provide for a number of different reasons. But again, that doesn't make me very marketable. And thank goodness for the team over at SOTF that are able to take you through a 4-phase program and teach you how it is your skills translate, how to communicate those skills, and how to communicate in the business world. Because while we do have a lot of skills that transfer as a special operator, right? My work ethic transfers really, really well. My ability to handle problems and multitask and take in lots of information quickly, of course, that was bred into me as a PJ. See one, do one, teach one is typically how we go in the special operations community. That's awesome. And that translates well. Well, that's about where it ends, my friend. Like, the civilian world and the civilian business world operates at a completely different speed. It operates at a completely different bandwidth. And not every single person that transitions in, guys have this idea where they're like, yeah, I'm an operator. I'm a Green Beret. I'm a special forces guy, what have you. These skills are going to translate great. Somebody's going to pick me up right away. They're in for a rude awakening. And I'll tell you what, if it wasn't for SOTF, and I do credit them, I don't say this lightly, they saved my life. Like, SOTF changed my life and the trajectory of my life for my family and my young child downstairs. And I say that with as much gratitude as I possibly can, because those folks helped me to understand what the next transition looked like, how to set myself up for success, how to get skills, everything from stuff that I have no idea how much I'm worth. You're talking about entering into it. Like, I can look at a pay scale in the military and go, I've been in for this long, I have this rank. Okay, this is how much I get. I do these special duties. Okay, this is how much I get. I have no idea how to do that in the civilian world. I'm a complete idiot. And a lot of times, veterans, they have it's like two sides of the same coin. You don't really know what you don't know. So some guys are just like, oh yeah, man, like 253 to start out. That sounds about right. Cause if I look at my little pay stub, it tells me with all the benefits that I get that I actually make, $275,000 a year. Okay, bro, I don't know where you're going to go and negotiate yourself into a starting position at some company. Again, off of some past experience that doesn't really translate a lot of times for $275,000 a year. I just, don't see it.
Yeah. I mean, that's something we talk about all the time here. There's nothing more annoying to me when I go on LinkedIn and I see an officer or a senior enlisted who has retroactively changed all of their military experience to the civilian equivalent. right?
Stop it. Yeah, stop it.
You know, CEO,
Absolutely not. Right.
CFO, whatever it is. First of all,
Yeah. COO. I was an operations superintendent. I'm a COO. No, you're not, bro. You have
I
zero
mean,
clue what you're talking about.
Tara and I were talking about this when we were having dinner a couple weeks ago. Like, procurement in the DoD, those budgets aren't real. That's not real money. We all know that's not real money. So you're not going to transition over and do procurement in the civilian world and have any idea what you're doing, because now you are actually accountable for cash, right? Like,
right.
where you aren't, in the DoD. It's funny. You said, not funny, but like, you said you had a little bit of imposter syndrome. I'm in a weird position, right? Like I'm 36, about to turn 37. I've been out for 15-ish years, right? Like, you were an element leader of mine in Indoc. So it's odd to, to kind of say this, but like, if I was hiring somebody like you coming out of the military, I would want the mindset that you just described. I would not want somebody who had worked at the wing level or the group level who said, I can do all of these things because I've done this here and I've sat in this office and I've, worked with all of these stakeholders across different branches and across different wings. And, I've mobilized all the, I'm not interested in that. I'm much more interested in the tactical, and I don't mean that in the military sense, but the tactical, practical type of work that you were doing more closely removed from your retirement. That's the kind of skill set. That's the kind of mindset that I would want as I'm hiring now. I had the unique opportunity to mentor my first flight line supervisor who just retired over the course of the last year as he was getting out. And, he retired and he was looking at all these different jobs. And I'm like, man, go get a job in an industry that you're interested in working in. And you're going to be, you're going to have jobs available to you that are above entry level, but aren't going to be what you think you quote unquote deserve. Go take that job and either scale within that organization or start to work. Don't spend 2 years trying to get the perfect salary, trying to get the perfect role. Go in, start doing the work, learn the civilian world, scale within that organization, or scale horizontally into another organization and ping pong your way up. Right.
Right. What's the difference between responsibility and value?
Mm-hmm.
We put huge levels of responsibility on the youngest possible person. You give me an E5 JTAC combat controller on his first deployment, and I will literally direct him to take human life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's what we do. The level of responsibility is crazy. Well, people kind of forget. And at those higher levels, and, to use the Trump weave here, there's a level of indoctrination that happens at those higher positions. They become highly political and everything is we have to have 7 conferences and people have to get together and have these high level conversations and utilize business terms and terminology. And, you don't see a lot of output from those things, right? That doesn't necessarily, that responsibility that you've had, you may be a commander of a unit somewhere. And if you're the commander of a special operations unit, you're literally training and equipping people to go kill America's enemies. That is our baseline function. That responsibility is not lost on me. That does not mean that you possess this inherent value in all of these other places. And people forget that. That's, to make a parallel to the political environment in which we're living. That's why there's so much hullabaloo over everybody that Trump is putting into these positions. If you look at Pete Hegseth, they're like, oh, well, he's a major and he has no idea what he's doing. He can't run the Secretary. I'll tell you what, he probably is a major with a couple of combat deployments and a Bronze Star. He probably understands the tactical maneuvering and all, of the military in general, and how it is that these people have just lost their way. When you talk about a flag officer, you talk about a brigadier general and up, man, those folks are politicians. They are politicians dressed up in military clothing. They are there to serve their political masters, and they're always trying to get to the next star, the next rank, the next place, the next rung on the ladder. Man, I joke that at E8 and at 05 in the military, you just get this lobotomy. Like, guys don't even talk the same anymore. And they get into all of these things. And that may be great if you're sitting in a weapons and tactics conference somewhere in Las Vegas, or if you're sitting in some of these other very high-minded conversations talking about your leadership philosophy and the like. That doesn't mean that you have value. It just means that you have a lot of responsibility. And people conflate that all the time. Plenty of authority, plenty of responsibility, but not a lot of value.
Yeah, I mean, we overvalue perceived perfection, right? So to use Hegseth as an example, it's like, fine, he'll make some mistakes. I'd rather he be in there making the mistakes that he's going to make, aggressively
Yep.
than somebody else who is going to safely make some mistakes.
Right.
You know,
And
which inherently safe
yeah,
in that position.
Yeah, and you kind of saw the same thing. Like people freaked out about JD Vance. JD Vance is a freaking super genius. Graduated from the Ohio State University, got his law degree shortly afterwards, started a successful tech company, and then, you know, was a congressperson, was a representative for 2 years. Before 3 years, excuse me, before he was tapped by President Trump. People freaked out. But that younger generation, those people that never get to where they're an established politician, the last person I want to see is some 65-year-old person that has been in these positions and been indoctrinated by the system. You need those disruptors. You need those people that have a mindset and a focus on the tactical level, because that's how they can bring value, because that's that's all they know.
Yeah, JD's a great example, right? Like he was a combat camera, right? He was a
PAO,
combat correspondent. So served in the Marine Corps. You know, came out of poverty, served in the Marine Corps, deployed, went to college, got into PE, got his law degree, got into tech, got into wrote a book, wrote a memoir. They made a movie about it. And then he started campaigning to be the vice president, went on every podcast imaginable and sat down for 3 hours and had a real conversation with people, both people who liked him and people who didn't like him, and people who were just trying to gather information. So we look at that and we say, oh, that's somebody who's tried a bunch of different things, has seen success in a bunch of different areas. And yes, they're not, you know, what the legacy media, what the legacy citizenry would assume a vice president, quote unquote, should be. Well, it's like, I don't want what you think should be. I want somebody who's tried a bunch of different things to varying degrees of success and has made important decisions, critical decisions, and then reflects on those decisions and can explain why they made those decisions and why they've jumped from thing to thing to thing.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's something that you don't see. And again, you know, the military, we breed it in. You know, we have all these processes and we have, you know, a strict, you know, from everything, you know, the way that you file a travel voucher is very strict and very regimented. And the way that you promote in rank is very strict and very regimented. And, you know, the Air Force specifically, they're really good at making officers into flag officers. They're very good at making lieutenants into generals. That's what they're great at, because they have year groups and progression milestones, and you have to hit this school at this time, and you have to be in this bucket, and you have to be competitive with your peers in this way, and here's how you set yourself apart. Those emergency breaks and those processes do not exist in the civilian world. They just don't. People, like, they'll look at that and be like, great, so what? So what are you going to do for me today? How much money did you save? Did you make us more efficient? Are you able to bring value? Can you communicate these things that you have in such a way that everyone else understands it? You can go into a room all you want and you can say all these things. If nobody understands or values those things, it doesn't matter. You're just another dude.
Yeah. The straw that broke the camel's back for me to get out at 4 years, right? Because I was thinking about cross training back into something more high speed, right? To like kind of go do that thing that I thought I wanted to do when I was 17, 18 years old. The straw that broke the camel's back for me on that front was a conversation with my brother, who was an entrepreneur at the time. He's 6 years older than me. And he was like, listen, man, service is incredible. Appreciate what you've done for this country. Appreciate what everybody you work with does for this country. But it's not going to be that hard for you. The civilian life, work and life in the civilian sector is going to be more difficult, and it's going to challenge you in ways that you need to be challenged as a human, as a whole human, right? But you were talking about your transition is not just professional. It's also emotional. It's also relational. It's also mental, right? Like all of these things, you don't just transition from one job to another. You transition back into a world that you left, and you have to learn how to become a person again. You have to learn to dispense with the elements of the indoctrination that you experience that you no longer need, and to keep the ones that work for you, and then to tweak and adjust those as you move forward in life and at work.
Right. Yeah. And thank God, you know, I'll shout him out again. Thank God for SOTF. Thank God there was somebody that could explain this to me. And, you know, one of the darkest periods of my entire adult life, you know, thank God that I had that team. at SOTF that could teach me those things and understand it. And there's always they're all veterans. Maybe not all of them. I think there's like maybe one or two that are civilians that they brought in that are awesome at their job. Shout out to Melba. I love Melba. But most of them can hit. I had, a Green Beret that I could just call. I had a combat air advisor that knew what the life is, that I could call and be like, hey, I'm really screwing this up. Can you give me a vector check? And they're like, yeah, it's just because you're transition, man. It's because you don't know any better. When every problem is a nail, well, I have a fix for that. It's a hammer, right? But if a hammer is the only tool you got, you need to figure that out.
What are the skills that you developed that they trained in you that had the most impact for you at the moment of not the one moment of transition, but like during those moments of the transition, and then the ones now, again, like you said earlier, it's 5 years, it's probably more like 15 or 20 if I'm being honest. I still feel like I'm transitioning, right. Out
yeah,
like a year out. Like what are some of the skills specifically that you developed, that they trained, that you've utilized?
I'll tell you what, the first and foremost, like phase 1 and phase 2 of that program are just figuring out who you are, what you value. And there's an extensive period that I didn't understand.
For yourself now.
Yeah.
Yeah. What you value and what you're good at. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But, in the military, you don't have to. I walk into any military organization right now. I walk down to the 58th Rescue Squadron. It's about to shut its doors this summer or whatever. I walk into the op soup and I'm like, hey, give me your roles and responsibilities. I go, here you go. Here's the org chart. Here's what I'm expected to do. Here's how I promote. That doesn't exist. That doesn't exist anywhere other than in the military, to have a specific roles and responsibilities thing. So you have to understand what it is that you value. You have to understand who you are as a person, even from something as simple as interviewing. When I first entered that phase 1 and phase 2 process, it is so introspective. It is you getting into these long form conversations, in group and in one-on-one, where you're sitting and you're talking to people and they're like, okay, what do you value? I want to be of service. Okay. Yeah. But what does that mean? Why do you feel that way? They help you develop your own, they call it your own personal anthem, right? I'm a multifaceted individual that approaches problems with tenacity, and I'm available and able to take on many things at once. That was a big part of what it is that we developed, so that I can communicate again my value. Not just that I had responsibility, I had worlds of responsibility. I was in charge of secrets, narcs, and weapons, right? Like take a life, give people drugs, national secrets, top secret clearance, all that other stuff that's supposed to be impressive. I can't communicate that unless I really why do you value being of service? Why is that something that's important to you? And figuring out how to communicate that appropriately to somebody concisely. You don't always have a chance when you're transitioning. Just getting into the interview process, by the way, is just crazy, because, wanting to interview with, 7 or 8 times with different team members and different guys on the phone, and everything's an interview. As you're talking, you have to figure out the way that you can communicate that as clearly and as concisely as possible. And you just have to be able to just hammer it. It has to be one of those things. I had no idea how to do that. For as much as I like to, talk ad nauseum on podcasts, or, I do have an ability to converse with people and the gift of gab, or whatever you want to say. Some people would just say that I just talk too much, but that's not the same as being able to communicate effectively. And because, those things, the military really does protect you in such a way, you don't really interview a whole lot. You don't really understand how to say, this is who I am. I know about your organization. Here's where I think I fit in your organization and how I can help you. I want to help you succeed because of these skills that I have. I think that was the biggest one for me, especially in those early phases, phase 1 and phase 2. And then 2 is just knowing, the knowledge that those folks bring. It's knowledge in the space. I had no clue. I work for a special effects company. I have zero experience in the special effects world. I just started driving to work without a GPS about a week ago. That's how FNG I am in this space, right? So of course I'm going to make mistakes, and of course I'm going to say things that are wacky, and there's, communications or emails that get sent out where somebody will pull me aside and be like, hey man, that's not really how we talk. It was too long, and you don't need this formal, and I don't understand why you have a signature block on a Gmail email account. It looks super formal. Just being able to pick their brain and go, to somebody that's been in the civilian space for 20 years and go, okay, why does everything move at this rate? Like, why do I not have to call the secretary before I call the office manager, before I call the general manager, before I call the CEO? You guys just go straight to the CEO all the time. Every time you just like go directly to somebody, and they would just tell you straight up, be like, yeah, man, that's not going to serve you very well in this next life. I think just those two things alone, being able to communicate who you are as a person and what value you actually do bring to an organization, that was the biggest one. I remember getting off those calls, with the team over at SOTF and just being like, holy crap, I guess that is why I value those things.
Yeah. And one of the things that the service members do, the veteran community, we're entitled, and we think that we are entitled to certain positions, certain pay, kind of in that physical, practical, sense of getting into a new profession. But we're also entitled, and we don't understand that people who have been working at the organization that we're now working in have been doing that while we were doing all these other things, which means they have value. And those conversations that you're talking about, that you're having with them, where they pull you aside and say, hey man, we don't do things that way. Here's a better way to do it. Or here's who you can talk to. Here's how you can do it. It sounds like it's in good faith. It sounds like it's in love and trust, which is incredible. Not all organizations are like that, but find the ones that are, and don't be entitled, and don't just expect that you're going to roll in. And because you were in the military, because you did a cool job, like jumping out of planes or loading bombs, that people are just going to automatically respect you. No, you have a new job and a new title, a new set of roles and responsibilities that you need to accomplish. And the only way you're going to accomplish those is if you learn from the people that have been doing that while you were doing the other things that you feel like entitle you to whatever. Yeah,
absolutely. And to put it in that military sense, like imagine having a new supervisor that comes in, and as opposed to doing, it's an axiom that's true everywhere, is like a commander that gets in the first 6 months, they just watch the organization. They don't try to come in and make sweeping change right away, because it's off-putting. People look at that and whatever. And, I didn't really understand or internalize that until the new position that I'm in now, is because I want to go in and I can see just immediately, right? There's easy fixes and low hanging fruit that I thought, okay, cool, I'm just going to knock this out. It's going to take me very long. You can't really do that, man. You can't really go in as the new guy and be like, hi, I'm the new guy. Here's all your changes because I said so. That might work in the military. You might be able to do that. Like, I've seen commanders go in and look at organizations that are sick and go, okay, tight, listen, normally you're supposed to wait a little bit. I'm not going to. This is all going to change right now. You have a little commander's call on Friday. And they're like, hey, on Monday, when everybody comes in, these are the new rules. So make sure you follow it. That happens all the time. That does not happen all the time in the civilian world. You cannot do it like that, because, again, you'll pay a personal cost.
Yeah, I mean, every conversation that you have, either at work, internally, right, inside the organization, or with vendors or with customers or with potential clients, like all of those conversations matter, right? Like back to Alec Baldwin, always be closing. Like you're always selling. You're always selling yourself, and you're always selling your organization. And if you don't represent it well in the right way, you could lose a customer, you could lose a vendor, you could lose a client.
Well, and it's another thing that, again, and I keep using the word indoctrination. I do so deliberately. It is completely normal to go to a big military conference and have a bunch of conversations without any output. Mm-hmm. That is completely normal. It is completely normal to exchange, tons of emails with folks over a specific issue that you're trying to knock down, and it could take, weeks, months, years. Sometimes it's completely normal to exit a conversation, somebody, without an ask, without a do out, without a, hey, well, who's doing that? You can't do that in the civilian world. You won't last that long. Like, something that my CEO is really, really smart on and really good about is, we'll have this conversation, and there's always like a 5-minute delay. And he's like, okay, so where's the ask? What are we doing here? We had this good conversation, but like this conversation took us away from other stuff. So if I'm going to leverage this opportunity cost of spending the time talking about this issue, it has to produce something. It can't just be a conversation that you had with somebody. And that's a remarkable difference between the military structure and the civilian world.
Yeah. How many interviews did you go through before landing this opportunity? And what was the first one like? And then what was this one like that landed it for you?
Well, thank God. And thank God that I met, SOTF again, and I got hooked up with a a guy named Rob Stryker. Rob is an awesome dude. He's absolutely fantastic. So it was, I mean, I went through, 6 months of interviews and, talking to Rob and then talking to the CEO and then having conversations with the entire team, my CFO, Matt, having these conversations, with these folks and having these interviews. I mean, it was a long boil. Like I would get off these calls and again, just because I was in the military and I just assumed because I didn't know, ignorance breeds arrogance. Once you think you know everything, you don't know what you don't know. And if you don't know it, you think that it's not an issue. Therefore, you think you got it on lock. I would get off these calls and I would go to Tara and I'd go, crushed it. That's it. This offer's coming. We're good. And then a month would go by and I would get a text be like, hey, just wanted to circle back. I want to put you on a call with, this person now. And I mean, I did that like 5 times. I got off the phone call and I was like, oh, this is it. I locked it down, crushed it, did really good, got great feedback from everybody. The folks at SOTF that had good relationships with some of these other folks personally, they'd hit me on the side. They'd be like, bro, just talk to these guys. You crushed it. You absolutely destroyed it. I'd be like, oh man, that's awesome. That's really good feedback. And then nothing. And I really just had to change my mindset and go, okay, hold on. So to answer your question, kind of, to answer it directly, I interviewed with 2 other places, kind of had these conversations and probably 3 or 4 interviews with each. And then, as the COO position with AES formalized and it started to get closer to a thing, I really went all in with them because I loved the team. I loved everybody that I was talking with. I loved every time I got off the phone, I got as much out of it as I put into it. And it was great. And I just knew, in my heart of hearts of thinking about it, I was like, this is the spot. This is where I can be of value. This is where I fit. It's not going to be easy and they're going to have to deal with me figuring it out. Like, to their credit, they understand, like, I'm not always going to be perfect. I'm going to engage in ways that, again, I'm going to need guidance. I'm going to need somebody. I'm not a plug and play guy right now. I want to be, and I can see a pathway to get there, but they had to give me the grace to say, okay, there's all these other things that are going on in the background and you're figuring it out as you go, literally building the plane in flight, to where I have to essentially win them over and go win. So, I wanted to say overall, I think I interviewed for a solid 7 months with those different 2 or 3 companies, including, AES at the same time. And then it ended up to result in an offer about 8 months, I think, after the first phone call.
So how specifically were you adjusting your mindset during that process? Was that something that the SOTF people made you aware of? Nobody made me aware of that. I went through, there was one job I didn't get. I went through 9 interviews.
Yeah.
I met everybody, CEO all the way down, and everybody loved me. And they ultimately went in a different direction, not with a different candidate, but they went in a different direction organizationally. As I was having the conversations with them and I was asking them questions and then they were asking me questions as we were talking about it, they ended up dispensing with that role and rolled it into something else. And so I went through, that was like 3 months. I was during COVID, so it was brutal. But it was like, 9 interviews over 3 months. And I never adjusted my mindset. Like that was,
right.
I wouldn't say a mistake. I look back, I've learned a lot from it since, but like, how did you actually adjust your mindset over that 7-8 month period?
Well, number one, it was expectation management, number one. And then number 2 is being brutally honest with myself. Like, we always have a higher opinion of ourselves than other people. And I know I make self-deprecating jokes literally every single time I'm on any platform and talk about what a terrible person I am. But you still can see something that you think you're going to be good at. And you're like, oh, I'm the guy. This has got to be it. I can't understand why they didn't get off this phone call right now when my email went ding with an offer right away. It was one of those things like expectation management, man. Like, my wife, before she works for the company that she worked for now, she was going to go work for Apple. She went through 19 interviews, and it didn't result in anything. Like, that is crazy to me. And she was probably the most highly qualified candidate for the specific position that they were bringing her in to do procurement. So, it was expectation management, and, she did a great job too of, I was with her during that process, also during COVID, when she was deciding where she was going to land after, she left her last company. So expectation management, number 1. And then number 2 is, being brutally honest with yourself and just admitting, and it sucks the worst, for a very long time, I like to consider my guy the easy button for my dudes. If you walked into my office and you asked me a question, I would fix your problem. You didn't even have to bring me you didn't have to bring me a solution. You didn't even have to bring me a problem statement half the time. You could walk into my office and go, "Hey, Aaron, this is annoying to me." And I'd be like, "Okay, let's talk through it. Okay, I got it. I'm going to take this for action." And I would knock it down. Like, that's what I did for a very long time. That's what being a team sergeant is. It's what being an operations superintendent is. It's what being a senior leader in those organizations is you can take a nebulous sort of topic and just make the fix. Admitting to myself that I'm not that guy. I want to be that guy. But when I sit in my office at my new job now, people come into me with problems. I don't even know how to define the problem statement. And therefore, I can't even start to work on the issue because I need more information and more education on what the issue is before I can even start to tackle it. And having to admit that is humbling. Having to know, not even just admit it or internalize it, you have to know that you are now the new guy. You are back at the bottom of the rung, the bottom of the ladder, and you have to try and work hard every single day to get smarter, to get better, to orient to things faster, to understand the space and what you're being asked to do. That paradigm shift is tough, especially for, I was a pararescue team leader. I was a jump master. I did all these things that put me at the top of this very small niche. Not at the top of the niche, obviously. I'm not saying I was the best PJ in the world. That's definitely not it. But, as far as, qualifications, currency, certifications, all these other things, I had all of those things that made me the subject matter expert in those fields. And to no kidding internalize that. And I think this is a thing that veterans have a really hard time with. Man, you're not that guy anymore. You aren't the guy. You spent 20 years. You spent, even for you spent 4 years living and breathing ammo. You just did. You knew exactly what it is you were supposed to do inside of your given lane. And anytime anything came in that lane, you're able to crush it. Well, you're in a completely different lane now. And there's going to be some things that serve you and some things that don't. But the first thing you have to do is number one, expectation management. If you're not communicating those skills or that value in a way that other people can understand, they're not going to know how you fit. And then number two, you have to admit it to yourself. Like, you're not that guy. You're not that person anymore. You can get there again, but it took you 20 years to get there before. And, I had that conversation, with my wife and with some other folks, with close friends as I was going through the process. Man, it took me 20 years to get that certification, qualification, to get those bona fides, if you will. I've been doing this other job for 3 months. Of course, you're not going to be the guy. Of course, you're going to make new guy mistakes. Of course, you're going to do silly things. And you're just going to have to take that one on the chin and go, okay, great. That wasn't my best run. Don't make that mistake again. And go on and just be able to press forward.
Yeah. And you still have to have confidence, right? You still have to have confidence in yourself. You have to have confidence in the processes that you don't understand yet, right? And you have to have confidence that you're going to close that gap. And you still have to maintain the correct frame, right? You have to keep repeating myself, but you have to be confident and humble, right? I think so many people think that humility and passivity are the same thing. You don't need to be passively humble. You need to be aggressively humble. So you need to understand where you fit, what you're capable of, what you're not capable of, where you don't fit, and then to close all those gaps and integrate all of those things, both within you and within the organization, to then move forward confidently, but with humility, so that you're honest with yourself, and then therefore honest with the people that you're working with, so that they can then, again, back to that integration with the civilian community, right? You need their help to help close that gap, so that they're confident in you because they hired you to be the COO, but they also know that you don't know everything that you need to know. But if they didn't hire, they wouldn't have hired you if they didn't trust you to close that gap. And you're going to meet them halfway, right? It's like Hitch, right? It's like you're going to lean in 90%, and then they'll lean in 10%.
And then got it.
Yeah. So, it's a really hard thing. I think it's especially hard for veterans. I think it's probably especially hard for operators, because everything, target packages were given to you, right? Like, you had a really difficult job, but everything was set up for you essentially perfectly for you to then go do that really difficult job. Well, now you have to set up all that shit yourself, or you have to work with other people to set it up and then go execute, which means that you're not just training for the mission. You're not just training for that one thing that you're responsible for. You're actually doing it all together, and then you have to go execute at the same time.
Right. Yeah. And that's a big thing too, is like, hey, when you make the plan and then you execute the plan and it doesn't work, guess who owns that? It's not like a military debrief. It's not like where they sit down and go, hey, today wasn't our best run. We had these other factors that played into it. All right, let's make it better next time. Now somebody can pull me in their office and go, hey, you made this plan and then you executed the plan. And I don't know if it was the planning aspect of it or the execution aspect of it, but it didn't. So get out of here. You're done. And you're not getting a paycheck next week. Like, that's a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. You have an at-will employment now
Right.
that you didn't.
I'll be honest, I don't want to put too much about my offer out there, but I didn't sign a 6-year contract with these guys. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
There are performance metrics. They expect performance.
Yeah. So on the AFSPEC war side, right? You're out. You're doing this other job, right? You've gone through this transition that we just talked about, and so you're all in on your new civilian life, right? Like building everything that you're building there. But then you're also still engaged in the AFSPEC war community. Obviously, you said Peaches is retiring next week, so pretty soon all three of you are going to be like completely out, but you still have value and responsibility and authority and credibility within the community. How has retiring from the profession affected the way that you view the profession, and then view the preparation that you're helping these guys go through, especially because you didn't go through, INDOC is not INDOC anymore, right? So they're not going through what you went through. So how does being retired and being out affect the way that you view it and then communicate what you guys want to communicate?
Yeah. And I think they're almost the same answers, that I'm able to communicate exactly what it is. And that's something that we've always hung our hat on. Listen, like the military, we do not hold back on the podcast when we tell people about the bad stuff. We want people to make the best clear-eyed decision that they possibly can. And in order to do that, you have to tell them the risk. I'm not here to recruit you. There's scout, recruit, develop. We're firmly in the scout range. And then we dabble in the development range, right? Like, I'm not going to take somebody through a workout program. I'm not going to take somebody through, the physical preparation, whatever else. I will give them absolutely all the information that I possibly can. So as I've transitioned, there's a whole bunch of people that I don't talk to anymore. And it's because they have their life that they have to get to, right? Like, you have all these acquaintances that you may be friends with, or that you may talk to them, and you have this relationship. The phone isn't ringing a whole lot, kind of once you step away from that space. Somebody said that you only matter in the military to that specific organization as long as your voice echoes in the hallway where you work. Because they have to move on. They have a mission. They have another thing that they have to get after, and you're going to be way deprioritized. So I have a ton of, PJs that I would consider friends that I just haven't talked to, and I haven't heard from, and I haven't interacted with. And you have to realize that that's okay. It happens when you leave a unit. It happens when you leave a team. It happens, unfortunately, when you have friends die and you lose, contact with, their family or whatever else you might have. But it's important for us to be able to communicate to people in an honest, a transparent, and an open way, so that they can go, oh, okay, well, this is a risk, but I still think that it's worth the risk for me to try. I still think that this is worth it for me to go do. And, I do too. My connection to the career field and that connective tissue is obviously every single second that passes a little bit more irrelevant, a little bit older, a little bit out of it. I no kidding. So there's a big conference in town, and I'm going out to see a bunch of the guys that are in town for it. Some of them are my close friends, but I met a gentleman today. I had no idea. Like, I did not know who this PJ was. Like, for me to sit down with somebody and go, oh, you're a PJ. I know where you work now. And where did you work before? Okay, got it. Never heard his name before. Never met him before in my life. And it's one of those things like, well, were you really supposed to? Were you supposed, you've been away from the game. You haven't been running in those circles, working at even, as I transitioned out from 2019 to 2024, I was working in an ST unit. There's a whole group of pararescuemen that graduated the pipeline from Kirtland and went to a rescue unit. I don't even know their name. Somebody will text me, be like, hey, I talked to this guy. I said he was a PJ. Do you know him? And for the last year, more and more, I'm like, no, I actually don't know him. That doesn't mean anything. But that's something that you want to connect the younger generation to. I want to be able to communicate that. I want to be able to, even though it hurts me emotionally or it causes me, true stress, like distress, to talk about some of the worst parts of my career field, or the worst, career field, or worst parts of my career, or worst, things that have ever happened. I think it's important for people to understand that. I think it's important for people to hear those words and go, okay, hold on. So you're telling me this is the, the worst part of it. Mandatory fun day. Austin, I can't, it's Austin Von something on whatever.
Yeah.
He's hilarious, because in one of his skits, he was just like, talking back and forth as he does between a civilian and a guy that's in the military. And they're like, hey, how was the military? He's like, oh, it's terrible. Absolutely hated it. Worked with the worst people. We're like, oh, are you glad to be away from him? No, I miss it every single day.
Yeah.
I do not miss it every single day. I tend to move on, pretty quickly from one thing to another, and try to like, okay, this is what it is, and now we're going to do this next thing. So it's not like I miss going into a unit every single day. I miss the dudes. I miss the camaraderie. I miss those good times that we had. But those things are important to communicate to people. I think, for us, to look at Peaches, who had a remarkable, 24 and a half year career, 26-year career at this point, however old that guy is, that's crazy. Think about the lives that he's impacted and the things that he's been able to do. Well, those things are going to fade away. Those phone calls from folks and acquaintances that he talked to a lot, like those things are going to not be a thing. And he reached, group chief sort of level of where he was. He's an E9 in the military. That's not an easy task to do. But it's important for a 17-year-old out there to hear that. It's important for people to understand, even if it's somebody else that has no intention of getting in AFSPEC war. It's important for us as veterans to get that out there and say, hey, man, listen, these are the things specifically that we have had to deal with. And we want to communicate that to you in a way where you can understand a little bit about us, just a little look inside of the window of who it is we are and what it is that we do. Because I think that there is value in that, of opening up that discourse and bridging the gap. People think there's this wide divide of being in the military. Oh, you're a robot and you just do what you're told, and everybody wears the same clothes and says the same stuff and does the same rituals. Okay, yeah, to a certain extent there is, but it's like that in any culture. Everybody has their own culture there. But I think that there is value in folks like us telling people the good, the bad, the ugly, the indifferent, so that they can look at it as an entire package and go, okay, cool. I understand what this is. I understand you're not going to get paid enough. I understand it's going to take a physical and a mental toll. I understand the divorce rate. I understand the proclivity of binge drinking and carousing and doing stupid stuff like young guys. I know, right? That young guys and girls do when they're in the military. I got it. I'm not saying it's great. I'm not aggrandizing it. I'm saying these are the things. There's pitfalls that are in here. And oh, by the way, it could possibly be the best thing that's ever happened to you in your entire life. You could have a happy relationship and a strong marriage and a great career and not have PTSD and not be some broken veteran. That's possible too, but it's largely on you. And we're going to give you the information, and we're going to tell you as honestly and as openly and as transparently as we can, in the hopes that you make the right decision for yourself.
Yeah, we can't fulfill the self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like, we can't, on the one hand, complain that the culture and society views us that way, and then bring that to life.
You're living the stereotype, homie. Like, you pick a lane here. Either you're a victim or you're a victor. Either you have all these experiences and it was great and you're deserving of all this other respect, or you perpetuated the stereotype through your actions your entire career, and now unfortunately you're paying a penalty for it. I don't know a different way to say it.
Yeah, take responsibility, be responsible. Just like, we are a culture that says that, so we have to be a culture that does that. We have to.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah. Well, it's as good a place as any to end it. I want to be respectful of your time. Will not be the last time that we do this online, and definitely won't be the last time that we do it offline. Aaron, where can folks find you? Where do you want to drive traffic? What can we tag, collaborate with, and put in the show notes?
Man, I'm super easy. You can find me. If you just Google me, my name unfortunately comes up on the Google machine, and you can find me anywhere. Go to onesready.com. I'm always there. I manage the social media account. So 90% of the time, if you DM us, I'm the one that responds back. Peaches does a great job too. And he's going to be doing more of it because he's about to have some more free time. So check us out at One's Ready. You can follow me at Aaron Loves America on Instagram. You can just type that in. Thanks. I'm not shadow banned anymore. so you can actually find me when you search me. And then check out the War Room podcast. We're going live every week, Fridays at 6 p.m. Eastern time, 3 p.m. Pacific time. So you can see that panel show there. And again, I'm on X, I'm on Instagram, on the YouTubes. Just follow me wherever. And if you need anything, just go ahead, DM me. I have no problem. If you want to reach out and you want to talk about anything, and I don't care if it's mental health, I don't care if it's getting into the military, I don't transitioning through civilian world, whatever it is, I will help you out. I will respond to you. You and I will have a conversation.
I love it. To end each episode, as you know, I ask an open-ended question. What's on your heart and your mind for our community right now? Could be a piece of advice, something you want to get off your chest, or something you want to reiterate that we've talked about today. But Aaron, what's on your heart? What's on your mind?
Don't be black-pilled. Do not approach the world from a nihilistic viewpoint. Have hope. When you take the white pill, we all know the matrix, the red pill and the blue pill. If you're black-pilled, everything is worse. Everything's falling down all the time. Have hope. Have hope in who it and what it is that we've established here in America. Have hope in your fellow man. Extend them the grace that they deserve, because that's what you would want for yourself. And really lean into your local community. Find somebody that shares your values, share your morals, and be the person that engages. Don't just sit on the internet and bemoan everything and say everything's wrong and everything's stupid and everything's fake. Be the person that actually goes out and makes it a point to smile at somebody, have a conversation with them at the gym, or maybe just say hello because you have no idea what that person's going through. Don't be black-pilled.
Well said. Love it. Appreciate you. Appreciate your time. We'll see you.
Love you. Later.
Love you, bro.